Hey, everybody. My name is Matthew Fredrickson, and I'm the Director of Open Source Software Development at Sangoma. And my job is to take care, or I have responsibility over the Asterisk project as well as the FreePBX project at Sangoma. And I like to talk about that and talk about what's happened this last year for both those projects at the end of AstriCon. And it's kind of a tradition we've had for a very long time. And so I hope that you'll be patient as I go through some of the updates. Some things you may be very interested in, some things other people may be interested in. But I've hoped to catch a variety of topics and new features and developments that may be appealing to a broad audience. All right, so to get started, in the land of Asterisk, there have been 8. So we have a number of actively maintained branches, 18, 16, and 13 right now. And they've 18 and 16 have both, well, sorry, 18 and 16. I said 13. I shouldn't have done that. 18 and 16, and they've both received 8 bug fix releases, and they have had a number of point releases over the past year. Asterisk 13 and 17 are now end of life. So no more security fixes even for them. And there have been 1,220 merged code reviews across all branches this last year, which is a lot of contributions and effort from a code review perspective. All right, so as far as Asterisk forums go, we like to talk about stats in the beginning a little bit. You can use them. It's at community.asterisk.org if you like forums. And there have been over 9,100 new posts this last year and over 625 new contributors. So for any of you that watch these presentations I do every year, this is probably no surprise, but Asterisk 19 has been released. Yay! So another new release of Asterisk this year. It's been composed of 348 different code reviews and about 50 different contributors. So lots of people from lots of different places moving the project forward. And I kind of like to give a little bit of a wall of fame in terms of Asterisk contributors. And here's our top contributors by the number of code reviews merged. And there's a number of people both within Sangoma and outside of Sangoma on this list. And so I want to thank everybody, particularly that have gone through the code review process with Asterisk and the code contribution process and stuck it through and got your change or your bug fix included within Asterisk. All right, so I like to talk about releases just to remind everybody, particularly those who aren't extremely familiar with how releases work, standard releases versus LTS releases in Asterisk. So standard releases have a year of bug fixes and a year of additional security fixes. Some examples of that are the 17 branch and now the newly formed 19 branch. LTSs in Asterisk land receive 4 years of bug fixes and 1 additional year of security fixes. And some examples of that are 16 and 18. And typically, although this, there have been exceptions to that, but typically every other branch is a standard release and every other branch is an LTS release. So they kind of alternate. So Asterisk 19, what's new? So we have a variety of topics that we're going to discuss today. Again, just to re-emphasize that the things that we pick are we cherry pick these from the big long list of changes and things like that, and there are far more changes than we discuss in this presentation. But hopefully there'll be a few things that may be of interest to lots of different people. So topics are stir shaken, speech-to-text, RTPP, PJ-SIP, a little bit of project policy for module deprecation policy, and my favorite topic, or my favorite category, is miscellaneous fun. So just to kind of give a little bit of background, we participated in a open source SIPit conference. So SIPit is a conference that used to be composed of industry players, so big telecom industry players that happen, about once a year or so. And it was a SIP interoperability conference to make sure everybody's SIP stacks were compliant with each other. And as new RFCs were added, that everybody implemented them in a way that was that everybody could talk to each other properly. And they opted not to do that. A couple years ago, they stopped doing the SIPit conference. And so some of the open source projects got together to do kind of an open SIPit event to do some testing on some newer technologies like stir and shaken, and then make sure that at least the open source vendors, that we were all interoperable and compliant against each other, which was very good, but particularly since it was a very fast moving standard, and things were changing, but it was being adopted very quickly. It was good to have the opportunity to do these interoperability tests, because I think a lot of people found bugs and issues and things like that in their implementation. And so along with that, we found a few things as well, which was really good. And that, I don't know if you recall last year, but Stir Shaken was kind of a big part of 18. And we had some more things in Stir Shaken land that we did as part of the 19 cycle as well to fix some of the issues that we found. Some of those included issues with multiple SIP authentication headers. Let's see. We added support for RSA certificates alongside ECDSA certificates. We now support X509 encoded certificates. There were some issues with local certificate caching that we identified. We also needed to switch to base64 URL encoding, and we added the date header and some other fields that we needed to that were missing. So again, the goal is to become more compliant with the specification and other implementations. So all current changes and improvements and fixes and things like that have also gone back into the 16 and 18 implementations of Stir and Shaken. And you can check the sample configuration file and release notes to get some more information about it. And there's some more work on that coming. Also, speech to text land. So when we were looking at Asterisk, one of the big areas that we felt that was the world was kind of changing on, and that there was some need to improve upon, was the speech to text, speech to text technology within Asterisk. So I don't know if you remember, but previously we added support for this thing called external media, or we called it external media support, primarily to be used by ARI developers, so Asterisk REST interface developers, so programmers building REST-based applications around Asterisk using its RESTful API. It seemed like that we did a pretty good job with that, but it did not allow us to hook back into Asterisk traditional dial plan. So that functionality didn't allow us to, didn't allow dial plan developers to be able to hook into those services, as well as mostly the hooks and information necessary so that that an external REST application developer could do that primarily. And so we decided that we probably need to kind of complete that work or extend that work so that dial plan developers could use the speech to text applications within Asterisk with some of these new providers that we have, particularly like, there's a lot of options now with Google and Amazon and some of the other big players providing externally hosted speech to text engines. And so the problem though was so each one of these providers have different ways of communicating with them. They've used different audio formats. They've got different ways of returning responses when it detects speech or detects, speech that needs to be turned into text and things like that. And, there's a solid argument to be made that you probably don't want to do there are arguments to be made that you don't want to do a lot of this provider-specific code within Asterisk. So, these providers also, a lot of times they'll provide SDKs and things like that allow applications to be able to hook directly up to them. A lot of them don't provide C SDKs. And so that probably would have put us in a spot if we tried to do it directly within Asterisk of trying to sort of reverse engineer / chase a lot of these speech to text providers and do it in C code too, which is never a great place to have to make lots of changes and things like that. It's a very low level language. And so we opted to actually do the process of abstracting between different providers and things like that, and kick that outside of Asterisk so that you could use, nicer, more convenient languages for doing that as well. And so that was kind of the thought process behind that, is sort of have an external proxy that managed the different speech providers and things like that, and then turned it back into something that Asterisk could understand. And so, there's 4 parts in building this, technology. There's 4 major parts. There's kind of a protocol that has to exist between Asterisk and this external translator or proxy that sits between Asterisk and the provider. And then there's the actual external translator itself, or the guy that actually speaks to the speech-to-text engine and then turns that into something that Asterisk can understand. And then you've got to build a module in Asterisk to be able to talk that protocol and turn it into something that the Asterisk dial plan applications can understand. And obviously you have the dial plan functionality. And so again, the connectivity portion of it is pushed out. The protocol is simple. That is spoken between Asterisk and the translator is JSON-based and WebSocket-based protocol. And so again, this allows you to use nice languages. You can use high-level languages, PHP or Node or whatever, to talk to those providers using their SDKs. And then you just have to turn it into a simple protocol, vendor abstract protocol back to Asterisk if you're implementing one yourself. And so we, as part of this work, we're building one ourselves, and we'll be publishing that. So there'll be a proof of concept of how someone might implement an external translator to one or potentially more of these providers. And so that'll be available for people to download and use and things like that. On the Asterisk side, the C module will have to be written the C module is written, will have to be, the C module is necessary so that Asterisk can actually speak this new protocol. And so that's part of it. And the translator will pass. So the way it'll work is, when Asterisk has a call or a conference that someone wants to implement or to do speech recognition on, it'll send the media out to the translator, and the translator will send that out to whatever provider you're using. And then the provider will send, the information about it in the form of, some sort of response, like, this person said such and such, or these are the words that I detected. And then the translator will send that response back to Asterisk in a JSON payload, where Asterisk can turn that into something that like dial plan applications and things like that can use. So we'd hope to have this work for the most part done at this point, but this year has actually been a lot busier year than we expected. We've had a lot more work on the stir shaken front than we realized. So that, we were hoping when we released Asterisk 18 that was mostly done, but as more and more vendors and interops and things like that have happened, I think and the standard has, evolved a little bit. There's been more work to be done on the stir shaken front than I think we anticipated this last year. So it's impacted some of the other new project work that we were trying to hit this year. So this one is still in progress, but hopefully in an early release of 19, we'll be able to push it out there. All right, on the RTCP front, just to give a reminder, in the land of real-time audio, you have RTP, however you want to say it, which conveys media information like your audio or potentially your video over the internet. And then you have RTCP, which goes with the RTP. So they kind of work hand in hand, and it goes along with the audio stream or the video stream that may be going back and forth. And what the RTCP does is it conveys metadata about it, like packet loss statistics and things like that. Something that might be interesting to a sender about conditions, receiver side conditions of the audio or video stream. As part of our multi-year effort to improve WebRTC functionality in Asterisk, this last year we decided that it would be important to audit our RTCP stack. It's very old, and it goes back to some of the earlier days of Asterisk, and I don't think we've had a chance to comprehensively audit it. And so we did that. And we, in that process, we also extended the test coverage around it as well. So why this is probably more important now than ever is that video over the internet, which is becoming more important day by day as more and more people use video regularly, relies heavily on those RTCP statistics being correct and conveying accurate information. And it's very, very sensitive to packet loss and poor network conditions. And so making sure that those statistics are accurate so that senders can act appropriately has become a lot more important than it ever was before. Audio is a lot less sensitive, and audio senders are a lot less sensitive, or it's not as necessary for audio senders to have that information to be able to provide a good audio experience, or it hasn't been to this point. So we found out actually a few things. We found a few things wrong. So we found out that our standard deviation calculation was incorrect. We also found out the minimum loss packets value was, if it was set to 0, it was counted when it shouldn't have been. And if you saw weird values in our dial plan RTCP stats for perfectly fine call, it's probably due to some of these issues that we found. On the PJ-SIP front, this is actually a really neat thing that happened this last year. But so if you are using, if you're trying to configure a PJ-SIP endpoint to be able to talk to Asterisk, what you have to do first is you have to set up a transport. So transports in PJ-SIP land are essentially a way of describing the ways that Asterisk may talk SIP to an endpoint. And they define like the protocol that's used, whether it's like UDP or TCP or TLS or whatever. And they also define what port the Asterisk is sitting on or that you're going to be using to listen. And there has been, so you can reload a lot of, you can warm reload a lot of things in PJ-SIP, and you can enable experimental. You have been able to enable experimental transport reload for a while on the transport objects, but there was a race condition in that process. That's why it was experimental, and we were able to remove that race condition and be able to make it so that transport objects can be reloaded. That's to say there are certain values that it covers and certain values that it doesn't cover in terms of the transport objects, so different aspects of it. But it is definitely a safe thing to do at this point. And there's a possibility of adding reload of other attributes to the transport, such as maybe new TLS certificates and things like that might be interesting to add as well in the future. All right, so this is kind of project policy type things, but we added an official module deprecation policy. So Asterisk is, it's a very mature project. We've been around for a long time, and there are pieces of code that either people don't use anymore or that developers have, there have already been successors written for that functionality, and developers aren't maintaining the old version of that and things like that. And so we wanted to make sure to solidify our deprecation policy so that people understood, as we graduate modules to sort of end of life and pass them on to the great beyond, that we had a very well documented and written policy. And Josh Culp over the Asterisk team at Sangoma did a really good job working with the team to try to have a well written and well defined policy. And so that was a good thing, I think, from a predictability perspective for people that use Asterisk in infrastructure and network environments, understanding if there are particular modules that you have an interest in or may impact you, having a nice place where you can see, what the policy is as far as if they are deprecated, when they're going to go, or even if your modules that you may be using are impacted, and having a nice place to go to check that out. That's kind of all part of this. So there's a procedure. So initial proposal happens to the developer mailing list. So if you do have an interest in Asterisk modules that you want to be deprecated, it might behoove you to keep apprised of what's going on the developer mailing list, and so that you can weigh in if somebody wants to propose to deprecate something that you care very much about. And there's a certain time, or only on certain releases can modules be proposed for deprecation. So in preparation for standard releases, so instead of versus LTS, so in preparation for standard releases, a lot of times people will propose deprecation. They can only be marked as deprecated in a new standard release, like 19 or 17 or whatever. And that deprecated marking on the module. So deprecated does not mean it's gone yet. It just means it's on the way out, right? So in preparation, well, as part of that, the module is marked as deprecated as its support status, and that's carried over into the subsequent LTS release. So if it started in let's say something was marked as deprecated in 19, it would also carry over into 20. So asterisk 20, whenever it's released, it would also be marked as deprecated in 20, and then in the next standard release, it would be actually removed from the source code tree. All right, and there's also, as mentioned, an asterisk module deprecations wiki page that kind of talks about the policy and also gives some information about when things, which modules are impacted. And so you may want to keep on top of that and watch that in case something hits you. And better early than later. All right, so asterisk 19, miscellaneous fun. This is my favorite category name. Here's the other fun stuff we've changed or improved. You can now force estimated bitrate for video in ConfBridge. So you can, if you need to do large conferences where you want to make sure that you aren't exceeding bandwidth limitations and things like that of your server-side bandwidth limitations on let's say the Asterisk instance, you can force the estimated bitrate for video in that case for all the participants or something like that. And that way you can cap it out essentially if you'd like. We've also improved PJSIP registrar logging to include IP addresses. Options handling PJSIP can now, you don't have to authenticate options requests if you don't want to. The stun software attribute can now be disabled. So as part of the in the WebRTC stack, it uses ICE, which takes advantage of the stun protocol, and now you don't have to list the software attribute in stun packets. The min, max, and ABS dial plan functions have been added to funcmath, and RPort can now be disabled in PJSIP using disable RPort. Yay! PJSIP headers can now be listed using PJSIP headers dial plan function, which is pretty cool. The app dial A option now allows playing to the caller as well as the callee. And the originate dial plan function or application allows setting variables on the originating channel, which is cool. Also, dialog info plus XML support is now in PJSIP that can provide caller ID information for anybody that's monitoring another endpoint, which is pretty cool. And that was actually that was one that a community developer implemented, and a couple community members worked to move that forward. And so really grateful for that. All right, here are a few reminders. Asterisk 13 and 17 are end of life. I mentioned earlier, I'll mention again. This, I don't think I can over talk about this one because Asterisk 13 probably was the longest running release we've ever had due to some complicated things as far as releases go and extensions and longer timeframes than normal between releases. But it has reached that time of life where it has stopped receiving security fixes and it is end of life. And so if you're still on 13, you really need to move forward. Asterisk 16 is LTS and goes security fix only in 2022. So keep your eyes out for that. If you're moving off 13, it's probably better to move to 18 instead of 16. I would urge you all to keep track of what's going on in newer non-LTS releases of Asterisk. A lot of times there's a tendency for people to move from LTS to LTS, and sometimes things change between LTS versions that it'd be better to find out about sooner. SIP, for those of you that either are new here or don't remember, is slowly marching to its end. It has already been marked as deprecated, and it will be eventually removed from the source tree. And as of Asterisk 19, ChanSIP will not be built by default. So for those that build from source, it will not be part of the default build. It's still in the source tree. You can explicitly mark it as, you can mark it to build if you want as part of a custom build, but the standard build will not include it. And so also, keep on top of what's going on in the Asterisk versions wiki page, and I'd urge you to check out the new module deprecation policy and deprecation wiki pages. All right, so now I'm going to move on to FreePBX. So in FreePBX land, there have been on the community forum. So FreePBX also has community forums. There have been over 26,000 new posts and over 1,100 new contributors. So it's pretty active community forums. FreePBX 16, let's talk about that. So the beta was released a few months ago, and testing has gone generally well. There was a very extensive QA effort to requalify FreePBX 16 against PHP 7. And it was probably more than 6 months. I put 6 there. It's probably more than 6 months. And I just want to make sure to give a shout out to community members that have been working on PHP 7 outside of Sangoma, especially, who have been pushing for this for a while. So, particularly Bill Simon. I think Bill Simon's done a lot of PHP 7 related patches to the open source sides of FreePBX. And so we're really grateful for everybody that have been pushing hard to help out in moving the code base to PHP 7. So some of the big things we want to talk about in FreePBX 16 are PHP 7 support, as mentioned before. So there's some performance improvements between PHP 5 and PHP 7, and which we hope to be able to take advantage of in FreePBX. And we would anticipate seeing improvements with large system management and other things that involve PHP intensive work or computation and things like that. It's also more appealing for developers in general who want to work on a more current version of PHP. And the work to get PHP 7 support in FreePBX 16 has taken place not just on the open source modules, but also on the commercial modules. We've added more GraphQL APIs. So we're continuing to push GraphQL on the API front. And there have been many more APIs that have been added, particularly for system management and provisioning. And you can find a lot more information on the FreePBX wiki if you would like to learn more about it. SIP driver, right? We talked about ChanSIP, ChanPJSIP at the Asterisk level. Let's talk about it at the FreePBX level. So pushing forward with the ChanPJSIP migration and ChanSIP being deprecated, we're also on the FreePBX front trying to also make similar changes to move PJSIP more into focus. So, ChanSIP does not receive, just so it's clear to everybody, ChanSIP does not generally receive any kind of maintenance at all, not even from community members, not from Sangoma developers. It just kind of is what it is. There are a number of outstanding bugs and issues on it that just have not been addressed. And really, if you may ask why, but fundamentally, ChanSIP has some problems, and that's the reason why ChanPJSIP was created. And it's very unlikely that they'll be fixed. So if you have a problem with ChanSIP, there's not really anybody that can help you with that as far as bug fixes and things like that. And so we would very much urge everyone to move forward to ChanPJSIP. ChanPJSIP is very old. It's, I think, eight-ish years old or something like that. It's been around for a very long time. It's been used in lots and lots of different products. Lots of different people use it. It performs significantly better than ChanSIP. So it does multi-core scaling. It actually does multi-core scaling across multiple CPUs for protocol handling and things like that. So the more cores you throw at it, the more the better SIP handling it does in terms of SIP message volume, SIP message handling, things like high volume SIP message handling. And so we would urge you to move your systems over to ChanPJSIP instead of ChanSIP if you have not done so yet. So as part of all that, ChanSIP is now disabled by default in FreePBX 16. So just to try to get people moving forward, it can be re-enabled in the advanced settings if needed, but we just really we're trying to give everybody as much runway as you can get, but we really, really want people to start. If you haven't moved, it's time to move. All right, UCP user templates. So somewhere between, I think, 13 and 14, UCP user templates used to exist for those of you that use UCP. And somewhere between 13 and 14, I think that they were missed due to some significant code changes in UCP. And so that was one of our big things we wanted to hit, is make sure to re-add those back in. So I say re-add, but it was kind of re-implement UCP user templates so that people can enjoy those again. And so they're back. And I hope that you're able to try it and use it and enjoy it if that's something that is important in your use of FreePBX. All right, so security improvements, firewall intrusion detection improvements. There have been many of those. Integrated whitelist between sysadmin and firewall modules. There's responsive firewall. On the responsive firewall, we've got adjustable thresholds now, so those are exposed so that you can adjust them if you'd like. Those are both good things from a configurability perspective and adjustment perspective, because sometimes they can be sensitive to different types of traffic and things like that. But that they need more adjustment for. We've got HTTPS redirect support, so you can now force redirect from HTTP to HTTPS in the GUI. And you've got the ability to be very specific about what SSL protocols that you'd like to support in FreePBX as well. Additionally, these are just some of these things are things that may impact you in different ways or may just not impact you. But the Asterisk Manager interface is now not binding to all interfaces on a FreePBX system. This was a decision that was made. It probably should have been done a long time ago, but it's kind of a security. It can present potential security problems if you leave it open to the wide world accidentally. And so we've got the manager interface. We decided instead of binding to all the different network interfaces on the system, it only binds to localhost. So that means that only listens to applications that are running by default on the local system. If you are a application developer that utilizes the manager interface and listens to it on another FreePBX instance, then you may need to customize this value so it's not set to localhost, or set it to whatever interface that you want it to listen on. We've also added UCP password validation, so to keep people from having 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever very simple password set up as their passwords. We've got complexity rules and things like that are implemented that can nudge users appropriately to select better passwords for their endpoints. As part of the FreePBX 16 work and the PHP 7 work, we had to move the licensing core to an engine called IonCube instead of Zenguard, because Zenguard did not support newer versions of PHP. So that was kind of that was a thing that was necessary for us to do commercial module support and some of the things that were important. Additionally, Sangoma, so these are commercial module improvements. Additionally, Sangoma CRM has been updated to integrate with Zapier. And I guess just for those that use the D phones and the Sangoma phones, EPM now fully supports the D phones in using their native application. So previously, dphone support utilized the XML applications using the JavaScript engine on the phone. We added support in EPM so that the D series and the new P series phones use the native applications on the phones with EPM instead, which is pretty nice. A lot of people like the native applications as their way of interacting with the phone and the PBX and things like that. So let's talk about distro. So this came up last year. We wanted to update the distro, and then for FreePBX 16. Right now, the distro SNG 7 is based on CentOS 7. And I think it was like in December, I think, of last year. It was like a month or two after AstriCon. The CentOS guys decided to drop the big news that the new version of CentOS 8, was not going to have the expected support life cycle that historically it had, and that everybody that was counting on that was just going to have to deal with it. And that made us have to take a step back in terms of our distro change and direction and things like that to figure out what the right thing to do was. The dust has kind of settled since then. It's been kind of a bumpy year in trying to figure out what would happen in terms of the reaction to that message, and it impacted plans for making SNG8 part of FreePBX 16. So any SNG8 that will be done will probably be part of a follow-up release of FreePBX. And so we are still working on an SNG8 distro, and we hope to be able to see that going forward. It's still going to be based on a Red Hat Enterprise Linux derivative like CentOS is. And I don't know, right now the leading contender is Rocky. So Rocky Linux was started by the guy who started the CentOS project a long time ago, before it was bought by Red Hat. And so he created kind of a new fork of Red Hat Enterprise Linux that was called Rocky Linux, outside of Red Hat, that enjoys the same support lifecycle and is still downstream. It sits sort of in the same position as RHEL in terms of the how it receives contributions and things like that. But I would urge you to stay tuned for more details. All right, I think that's pretty much it on the Asterisk and FreePBX front. Thank you very much for your time and for your patience as I've gone through some of these, some of the new features and functionality that have been added. Again, this is not everything. This is just a few highlighted and curated items that I get to talk about, or decide to talk about, or thought that people might find interesting, or general audiences might find interesting. But there's much, much more. And so I'd urge you to look at changelogs and look at wiki pages and things like that to be able to see some of the other changes. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you all have had a good AstroCon, and I'll see you around.